Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the lawfare harassment of the Trump administration's executive orders and how well coordinated that is, and and how it's outrageously activist judges that are making these rulings, but also and something that gives away, I think, the extent of their activism is how emotionally invested they are in the outcomes. They're not just judging on a matter of law or a matter of interpreting the law. They're deeply emotionally invested in these things. They're activists. They're rabid activists that are making legal decisions and legal determinations based on their activism, not based on the law or the letter of the law or anything of that sort. And so when they don't get their own way, or they don't think that the Trump administration is doing what they're told, they carry on like spoiled brats, and they stamp their feet and scream and kick their legs in the air and demand you have to do what I say, and they're just a district court judge, for goodness, can put a nationwide ban on the administration. That's insane. But there are a few things that are, I guess, a little sort of unique about what's going on. Firstly, the deep state is in control of pretty much everything, in control of the public service, in control of the NGOs, in control of most of Congress. Pretty much the entire Democrat Party is deep state controlled, globalist deep state. At least half the Republican Party is controlled by the deep state. Another decent section of the Republican Party is certainly sympathetic to the demands of the deep state and susceptible to the siren song of, we'll fix you up with a waterfront mansion type corruption. So really, there's maybe out of the entire Senate and Congress, there's maybe 50, 60 members who you'd say are not puppets and marionettes of the deep state. And again, every organisation, the United Nations, no matter where you look, in every direction, the deep state is in control. So President Trump, with his agenda, was in an unusual or an invidious position. In the case of Biden and Clinton and this sort of thing, when it came to deep state stuff, they could pretty much get done anything they wanted. The Congress would legislate in the way that the deep state wanted them, or the globalists wanted them to. The law enforcement authorities, the courts, they would all toe the line, and you may get a couple of outliers and gadflies, but not many. So pretty much the deep state can do what it wants when it wants. But in comes a President Trump, who's not a deep state puppet, and who's got an agenda that in many ways is completely opposite to the agenda of the deep state. How does somebody like that get things done? Well, they can't go to Congress. Congress isn't going to do things. And if they do, they'll foot drag and slow walk it. They can't go to any of the public service departments, say, do this, do that, because they'll just undermine it, slow walk it, put it into committees forever, and this sort of stuff. So you can't go to the judiciary, and because so many of them are activists, and the vast NGO machine and the funding machine. So really, if Trump wants to get anything done, the only way he can do it is to use the authority of the president, the office of the president, and issue executive orders. So he's issued an unusual number of executive orders. Not that other presidents haven't done it; they have, just not in the same quantity. And if you look at Biden came out with a lot of, or Biden didn't know what day it was. The executive orders that he supposedly came out with. He came out with quite a few. And I was surprised at the beginning of Biden's term how few of those executive orders were opposed in the courts. The right wing of politics, if you can call it that, the center right, the non fully aligned deep, the people who are not complete globalists, there's almost no opposing of Biden. There's a few. There was 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever legal cases, but in reality, hardly any of the deep state's executive orders, as in the deep state puppet, hardly any of those get opposed or challenged in the courts. That there's very few. Whereas in reverse, on the other side, the entire apparatus of government is used. Whether it's Eric Holder during the Obama administration or even Janet Reno in the Clinton administration, they're quite more than happy to use the power of the state to go after people that politically or ideologically don't agree with them. And the Tea Party type conservatives, all that sort of stuff, they were the IRS was used to give super ruthless tax audits and things like that. So I know when you have an absolute I don't know, what would you call it, a forensic tax audit, there is nobody can get past it. They will find something. No matter how small, they'll find something. So and no one can withstand that. Doesn't matter who it is. Interestingly, though, when the Republicans had an opportunity to then go after the Democrats with brutal forensic tax audits, they didn't do it. So it's only one side that's using the lawfare system as energetically and aggressively as they are, and that's the globalists and the deep state globalists. The other side tends not to do it, and I don't know why. Maybe they say, "Wow, it's not right to use the illegitimately use the legal system to do it," and it's not. I agree, but the other side will keep on doing it as long as they think they can get away with it, and if they think that their people are going to get thrown into prison for this, that, and the next thing, then they'll stop doing it. They're only doing it because they can get away with it, and that's why they continue. And this lawfare is no different. It's just on a scale that we haven't seen before. But because of the vast number of executive orders, again, the only way Trump can get things done. And if you look at the amount of executive orders, then you look at the legislation that Congress, and bear in mind that the Republicans control both houses of Congress now. They can pass anything they want, but for some reason they seem to be in this odd state of paralysis. Again, many of the Republicans are really deep state flunkies anyway, but they seem to be in this situation of paralysis where all the things that they could be doing, the laws that they could be passing, the legislation they could be putting in place is moving at a snail's pace. I mean, it's glacial. It's slower than molasses, and what 1 or 2 things have been passed in Congress. Now I know it's not, they've only been 70 or 80 days, and I know it's still early days, but why has so little been done? Whether it be legislation pending or legislation passed. They passed you have to be a citizen to vote and all that sort of stuff. But that's even that. I mean, the extent to which they're enforcing that. For example, there were numerous election laws that were broken, aggressively broken in the 2020 election, which gave Biden the presidency and gave the Democrats control of the Senate. Now, the amount of corrupt practices and illegal practices that took place in that election, but no one seemed to do anything. No one seemed to stop it or prevent it. Sure, there were some court cases, but then they seemed to always be heard by activist judges that ruled in favour of the deep state. So there was very little that even after that, whether this before or after the election, or the activist judgments claimed there was no standing to hear it. Things like that. It was very strange. So even though this law has been passed by Congress, will it ever be enforced? Will it be just blithely ignored and cast aside as it was in 2020? So I don't know. If the laws can be on the books, but unless they're going to be enforced with vigor and professional oversight and independent, impartial oversight. Look at the amount of activist judges. I mean, for goodness sakes. So Congress, in my view, has done very little. It's moving at a again slower than molasses. So I would argue that there's maybe another 8 or 9 months of legislative possibilities, And after that, then a lot of those congressmen are going to be facing midterm elections. They're going to be very reluctant to do anything that may, upset the rock the boat. So they'll back off and want to just do sort of defensive, soft manoeuvring and politicking and posturing and so on. So really, time's running out. My view is that most of Trump's agenda that have been reflected in executive orders will not be reflected at that time in legislation. Maybe another 2 or 3, something minor, but nothing major will be done. And I hope it's otherwise, by the way, but just looking at the way things are travelling. Now, this means that his executive orders can be overturned at any time. Now, there's a pretty decent chance that Vice President Vance will win the presidency in 4 years' time. So, and he's unlikely to reverse the executive orders. So, and so 8 years of these executive orders in place and being enforced as they are, as vigorously as they are, will certainly have a big. It's hard to roll back something that's been there for that long. Not that the deep state won't do it, but we're hoping that the deep state will have been more or less dismantled or gutted of its funding and everything by that time. But as much for every dollar that the Trump administration and Doge takes out of the globalist, the globalist money machine, for every dollar they take out of it, it's being replaced by money from Germany and France and Britain and Canada and elsewhere, Australia. So in reality, the globalist NGO activist deep state machine isn't being denied funding to the extent that we hope it might be with the dismantling of US aid. Sure, that's a bit of a body blow. Sure, it's an inconvenience. Sure, it's slowing them down. Sure, it's annoying and irritating them. But they're moving aggressively to make sure that's all replaced again by losing the British taxpayer or the German taxpayer or the Australian taxpayer to make up for those losses. So coming back to the lawfare and the harassment lawfare, these activist judges, again, in my view, these activist judges have all been appointed based on corrupt election of senators in 2020, and I, as with the corrupt election of Biden, they particularly wanted control of the Senate, and they got it, and then that gave them the ability or the capacity to appoint activist judges, and they did. I mean, something like 200 or over 200 rabid activists were appointed to the judiciary, particularly in the area of federal judges. And so what this means is that they have this vast, cabal of activist judges, some of whom couldn't get a job in an outer suburban retail store in the real world, but they're masquerading as judges and federal court judges, no less. And these are lifetime appointments, certainly as I understand it. So there's this vast army of activist judges that are out there. So the activist NGOs and activist groups and so on, if they want to stop Trump, they've just got this buffet, this smorgasbord of activist judges to go to. And they are going to them, and they are getting these things. Now, when we see the Trump administration not going along with or putting up appeals, I've noticed how emotionally Judge Boasberg and other how emotional they're getting. They're deeply invested in the decisions they're making. Now, that's not the sign of a judge that is just looking at the law and going, okay, well, I don't agree that the law means this or should be interpreted that way. These are people who've got a deep activist, ideological activists. They're fighting back against Hitler. They're the front line of the resistance. Are they judges? No, they're not judges. They're fighting Hitler. And they're taking this view to the decisions they make that they're the law, fuck the law, fuck the evidence, fuck the facts. We're the resistance, so we're fighting Nazis. So we're allowed to do anything we want in pursuit of that goal or that objective. Now, I've noticed this in any ideological judge, they are particularly emotionally invested because they're making decisions based on ideology and the emotion of all that, not the facts. And if you're not looking at the facts, then you're looking at the ideology, which itself is an emotional position to take. So that's what these judges are doing. And this deep emotional investment then reflects or is reflected or can be seen and is evidenced by when they don't get their own way, they behave like little brat children, which again, shows their lack of emotional maturity. I mean, can you have someone who that emotionally immature as a federal judge? Well, yes, you can, and you've got them. They're all over, all over the Western world, by the way. So I'm staggered and shocked when I met, for the first time, when I met a whole bunch of senior judges, some of the most senior judges in Australia. I met them. I was shocked at how childlike and activist and emotional they were. You shouldn't have people like that sitting on sitting on the fucking bench, the jurist bench. But there you go. So now I also know a judge or judges that aren't ideological judges, and they have a very different view. Their use of contempt to go after people who disagree with them, litigants or lawyers or whatever, is very rare. Whereas the degree to which they rely on contempt, a ideological judge would rely on contempt because they have to, because they're enforcing an ideological position absent of the facts. So they're going to get people pushing back against them in some way, but then they have the capacity, the power to use contempt to throw the person in prison or fine them or both if they don't go along with it. Now, on the matter of recusal, which is a huge issue, and I've noticed Congress in the United States, as far as I can see, is not dealing with it, that an activist judge must be required by law to recuse themselves. Now, if any activist group wants to stop the government from doing it, whether it be an executive order or something else, stop the government from doing something, then they can't just get it done by holding an emergency secret hearing while the other party has an opportunity to file a motion. That's how that can be seen as justice is beyond me. So this rabid activist group goes to a rabid activist judge and can get a national stay on something. So the judge must recuse themselves, or any judicial review of an administration's activity can only be done at an appeals court level, and that can be done by no less than 3 judges. Picked by lottery, I would suggest, to avoid the idea or to avoid the appearance of activism, or the both parties must agree on the judges that are going to sit on the panel. Maybe that's a better way of doing it. So that would, again, bypass the activism. I think judicial review should stay. I'm very much someone that believes that judicial review is a good thing, provided it's not done by activists. And so a 3-judge or a 5-judge panel where both parties agree, and they've got 24 hours to agree, so that one side can't foot drag it or slow walk it. Then there has to be a hearing held again within 24 or 48 hours, and then the matter can be heard, and both parties can file their documents. File their evidence and that sort of stuff. So there are, I think, many ways the just a single federal judge, holding up the whole government nationally or internationally, like Boasberg was trying to dictate international government policy on the federal government, on the office of the presidency, the district court fucking judge. I mean, you're kidding me, right? So these are some of the things that are issues. So just summarising here. The deep state control of everything meant that the only way Trump could get things done was through executive order, the power of the office of the presidency. Therefore, there are an unusual amount of executive orders getting things done. The deep state and the globalists oppose all of what Trump is doing, and they're using activist judges to slow him down, harass him, impede him, and just gum up the works generally. But there are things that Congress can do. Even an order of the president, an executive order can say, you want to hold us up, fine, judicial review, fine. But it's got to be a panel of minimum 3 judges to do that, appeal court level judges to do that, and both parties have to agree. You can have a tight time frame. You don't want someone playing footsie with, we can't make up our mind, we'll spend 6 months. No. You've got 2-3 days max. Those sort of things can be done right now and should be done through Congress. And this would have a sweeping effect on the federal judges, because the whole plan of the globalists was let's totally corrupt the federal judge area. This is why they wanted the corrupt election of the senators in 2020. Let's completely subvert the federal court circuit with activist judges. So that effectively gives us control of the judiciary. The Supreme Court can't hear every case. So we've effectively got control of the judiciary by doing this. So no one ever presumed in the framing of the Constitution or at any other time that this would be a tactic used by an external grouping, the globalist cabal, to subvert the legal processes of a sovereign nation state. No one ever perceived this could ever happen. And therefore there's no provision as to what to do. So the response must be to bypass this, because it's been a deliberately corrupted, poisoned area of legal practice, and that needs to be recognised and appropriate action taken. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.